Thank you so very much. Thank you guys for being here for logistics. If you're in this room, I think that you all may know the secret that logistics is one of the most exciting pieces of filmmaking. It's where things actually get done. It's where we get to facilitate the creative process. So, want to have fun with this, want to really maybe dig into things that people don't think about. So, we've got an incredible panel up here, and the great thing is, this is not a sprint race to a microphone to get your question in. This is going to be audience driven, but there is no microphone except for the ones that are up here. So if you all look up at the screens or look online, there is a QR code. Go to CWVFF.com/poll. The QR code, which is on the screen right here, will take you there. Go ahead and start putting in your questions, and you can upvote and downvote the questions that you want to see answered by our wonderful panel here. And we want to make sure that we are hearing what the room wants, and also if you're at home watching on the live stream, you can participate as well. Please do. Want to know what you all want to know about logistics. We're going to be talking about ADing, line producing, locations, production coordinating, any of these roles that help to make sure that your film happens. The things that make sure that things don't fall through the cracks. So again, we've got an incredible team here, and let's start at the end, and I'd like to, as we have the questions coming in, we'd love to have our panelists introduce themselves. So we'll start at the end with Kevin.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Kevin Bourne, and I have the honor of being here as a member of this esteemed panel. I feel a little bit out of place. I was a 30-year Army veteran, just retired in October, and jumped right into filmmaking thanks to my oldest son, who's a filmmaker, and had the great privilege of getting to bring 30 years of Army experience with logistics, planning, execution, operations, and all that that entails, and multiple deployments around the globe, and bring that to bear in a film set back in the fall. And we're excited to get to hear your questions today, and I'll certainly let you know that even though most of my experience in my life has been in the military, what I've noticed in the filmmaking industry is that it is incredibly similar. You just don't have bullets flying, and you're not worried about necessarily dying, although I know things are very dangerous in filmmaking as well, which we've experienced. But short of that, it's like a complex military operation, and all of the same considerations that we used in the military to deploy around the globe, I see us doing in the filmmaking industry as well. So I'm excited to hear your questions and see what's on your mind, and would be happy to share my thoughts and whatever experience I think that might be helpful for you.
I'm Sarah Burnett, and I am a producer for Realcast Productions. We do mostly promotional commercial work. We are currently in post-production for a Bible study series that I produced last year with some amazing co-producers. And so my husband is John Clay Burnett, and so we work together, so I say I'm John Clay's producer, because that's the work I love doing.
I'm David Cook. I do a lot of producing work. My background is doing locations work, production office work, stuff like that. So when people used to ask me what I do, I used to describe it as I do logistics, and the title changes.
So I'm Josh Pittman. I do location managing on features, and yeah, I take care of everything from restroom trailers to garbage cans to telling people where to park. So that's my world. It's the fun world. It's the glamorous world.
So, and also I guess I better introduce myself. My name is Jonathan Schutz. I am a production coordinator. I've been an assistant director. And I just have to say, for myself, like I said, I introduced logistics as an exciting thing. It's amazing to be able to support the creative process and really make things happen. You don't have to know everything about a camera. You don't have to know how to act. And even though we've got everybody up on stage, you don't have to be in front of anybody if you're in those kinds of roles, which is kind of awesome. So I would like to, as questions are coming in, if we can get those up, that'd be fantastic. As those are continuing to come in, I would love to ask you all to each, in a brief paragraph, like 3 sentences, explain why they should care about the job that you do. Not so much about you, but about the job that you do. Why are you excited about the job that you do, and why should they be as well? Kevin, we'll start with you at the end.
I'll start with a quote that we use often in the military. Plans are worthless, but planning is everything. if you don't go through the process of planning for a production and all of that entails, like contingencies and how things are going to possibly unfold, knowing that no plan survives first contact with the enemy, it is very important to you, if you're going to make a film, to understand that planning process is everything, but the plan itself is ultimately worthless because things are going to happen. Life is going to happen, and people have messy lives, and sometimes that's going to create a lot of chaos and complexity for you, but that planning process is priceless.
For me, what I love about logistics is that I like to say I make dreams come to life. Like, that's what logistics does. And so when I work with a director, I work with a spreadsheet in front of me and I let them dream. How many locations do you want? What is your vision? Do you want to rent a castle? Do you want to make a night character? How many extras do you want? Like, what does this look like? And I figure out on a spreadsheet how to help that come to life through the budget, through the relationships that I have with DPs and actors and all of these people. And so to me, that's what I like to say about logistics.
It's good stuff. I'm glad I'm here to listen to you guys. One of the other things I like, I guess we're kind of describing the same coin, just looking at it from different angles, right? So it's also kind of like the glue that pulls everything together. You have all these different people wanting to do different things that all contribute to that vision or that dream, as she was talking about. And so you're just trying to figure out, how do we bring all these pieces together with the right timing, in the right place, with the money that we have or with the money we don't have, to make all of this work together. So I like the aspect of service that's involved with this. You're serving everybody else on the team in so many different ways to allow them to bring the most that they can bring to the table.
Producing can be kind of hard to define sometimes, but essentially you as a producer are a lot of times carrying the project on your shoulders to completion. Beyond the producers, there's not really anybody else who's going to carry that and make sure that at the end of the day it gets done. Being a location manager, that's basically an extension of producing, and it's more hands-on in some ways. And what I do is I take care of a lot of the logistical details, especially related to on-set, to free up the producer. So again, there's a lot of different angles to this, but at the end of the day, you're trying to make sure that that vision gets accomplished.
Outstanding. So as we have these questions coming in, I think we're going to find that there's some that are going to be more geared towards certain strengths on the panel. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to direct some of those to individuals, and then if anybody has any place that they would like to chime in, please do. So our top question right now is, what is the ideal size for small budget crew with regard to logistics? David and Sarah, if you could speak to it. David, if you could speak to what the general crew size is that you find works from a line producer standpoint for low budget or ultra low budget features, and then Sarah from the promotional realm.
So it's an interesting question because there's a lot of different terms there that would have to be defined. There's this funny video I saw a long time ago on a well-known platform that there's this guy, he's talking about this boat that had an accident, and he says, you know, there's this minimum crew requirement. And they said, well, what's the minimum crew requirement? He said, well, one, I suppose. So you need at least one. After that, it's as many as you can afford. From a very practical perspective, on the projects that I'm working on that have about a 60 to 100 person crew, I have found that we need a lot more people dedicated to handling logistics than we used to just in the last 2-3 years. So as you're thinking about a project, if you've done some projects and you're getting ready to do another one, just bear in mind that it takes about double the amount of crew that you used to need in the production office or producing. I think a lot of that's just due to the change. We talk about cutting edge. This is cutting edge tip. You probably need double. Everything takes twice as long. You take twice as long to find equipment or resources or people. Everything just seems to be harder right now. But everything's gonna scale. So I would say as much as you can afford. You're never really gonna have too many people because you're asking about a small budget, so you're not gonna be able to afford as much as you actually would like to have. So it's really just trying to be as balanced as possible.
For promotional work, for me, it's about a thorough pre-production process really helps me cut down on my crew. in regard to logistics. And so sometimes we even have one person AD and produce, but only if the pre-production has been thorough enough that we know that the location is secured, so we don't need a location person. So basically, we're just going through and we're checking the boxes of each of those departments and making sure that they are covered, because especially in client work, you never want to leave your client in the awkward position of having to pick something up they didn't expect to, or having us drop the ball and putting them in a bad spot. And so we're going through, and if we can do it with one person sometimes, but then, as David is saying, as your crew grows, then the logistics support to that would grow.
And so I think that one thing that's important to point out there is that you can't afford not to have pre-production. If you feel like pre-production is going to cost too much, your movie's going to cost too much, because that's going to infinitely scale. As you don't have the time to prep, and as you don't take the time to actually plan, to make that plan, to know what you're going to go, things are going to get dicey.
If I could just add, so this is just kind of an estimate, if it's helpful to somebody. This is not hard and fast, and each situation's different. But in my experience, usually I end up with about one logistics person per 10 people on the crew. Could give you a rough idea if that's what you're looking for. Again, it's not an exact science, but that's usually what we end up with, at least recently. The more pre-production you have, the more you can cut that back.
And a lot of that's going to come down to the man hours, of how much of those man hours are you doing during or pre. And again, too, like David said, things are more complicated these days. We all know some of the reasons, the complications of the world in which we live, as well as, I mean, good grief, just this last year, flights were incredibly difficult to get a hold of. It just comes down to having that foresight to look ahead, pay attention, and again, make sure that we're clearing the way. Anything else we'd like to add to that real briefly, or we good to move to the next question? Okay, great. Let's go ahead and jump into, how does one find work in this career field? Does freelancing work, or is it better to be with a production company? Let's ask this in a slightly different way. Entry point to a logistical career. If you're interested in being a producer, being part of that whole enabling aspect of film, what do you see as the best entry-level spot? And again, we'll keep this kind of short, but if you've got additional pieces, let us know.
The good news is logistics is one of the easiest ways to get on a film set, I would say, because you can do everything from drive a truck to, a lot of just grunt work. So if you're willing to work hard and you don't really care how you get on a film set, you just want to be there, especially location department, that's one of the best ways to get your foot in the door. Because with location work especially, you're not really working on set with the director or DP as much. Who are you working with? You're working with the producers. So you can definitely get your foot in the door, and it's a great way to figure out where you want to go on a film set. So this is a pretty easy field to get into if you are willing to work hard.
Thoughts?
I would just say on this, a heart for service. So my co-producer that I use most of the time, we were working together on a project, and I needed somebody else who knew how to work Google Docs to help me build some documents for the next day, and he was the only person in the room who I knew who had that experience. So I said, hey, can you please put together the call sheet for tomorrow? It had a lot of specific information I needed on there. Sat at a computer, did it in an hour while I fielded calls for setting up everything for the next day. And I still hire him every chance I get. So having a heart to serve, having some of those basic office skills. I'm working on a project right now. They needed somebody who knows how to work spreadsheets. Learn how to work a spreadsheet. Learn how to build something in Google Docs. Learning some of these basic skills and then being available and willing to help, I think, is a huge piece of this.
Outstanding. And I think that willingness to help is one of the most vital pieces. We're here, again, talking about this. This applies to any of the logistical disciplines. Again, we're talking ADs, producing world, we're talking production coordinators. The whole goal is to serve and to support. And we have an excellent example in Christ in that, and an excellent opportunity to be Christ to our crews. There's a great question on, yes, absolutely.
So I would just say, just looking a little bit at the question as well, the route you take, whether it's freelance or working with a company, isn't really as important. The way you're going to get most of your work is through word of mouth. So if you do a really good job on something, if you're a hard worker, if you're serving, people are going to want to have you around. And so most projects, whether it's a company-based or all freelance, they're still going to bring a lot of freelance in. Or the people that somebody's going to want to bring on to work in a company full-time are usually going to be people that they've heard well of, or they have good, reviews from their peers. So you really want to just look for where you can meet a need, whatever that is, and start there and just grow from there.
And I would just say, write this down. Start 30 years in the Army, and after you've done that, you'll find work in this. No, I'm just kidding. So it was an entry point for me, having spent 3 decades in the Army. But Josh and I were just talking about this the other day, kind of how he was a victim of his own success. And I just want to tell you that if you have a heart, and I've gotten to work with Josh, if you have a heart for service, as Jonathan was just discussing about Christ and his example, your willingness to be on that set, to do whatever it takes to do it, and to do it with a great attitude. And some advice they gave to my son, several of his mentors said, be willing to work in any role on the set. And as you establish that reputation and you become a person that's reliable, dependable, with a wonderful attitude, everyone's going to want you on their project. Because honestly, producers don't have time to deal with all of the soap opera. What they really want is they want people they can just plug in and just unleash them to be autonomous, to do what God has gifted them to do. So be that kind of a person, and you won't have trouble finding work.
That is outstanding advice. And I could say everybody on this stage is doing that. And having gotten to work with, again, each person on this stage, I can vouch that's how this happens. That's how you get these jobs in this industry. And in this field is doing that. And I want to specifically touch on that with how have you seen the small detailed planning that come with logistics have an impact on the crew spiritually, physically, and mentally? Because I think that's one place where we've seen it, and I think let's say positively and negatively, because it can go either way. It can be a make or break thing based on, the logistics can have a make or break role in whether or not somebody recognizes the love of Christ coming to them from a production or not. And the same too for locations and these other things. So any notes or thoughts on that?
Yeah, let me start with this, because one thing I want to tell you about all the people up here, we all completely understand our full reliance upon God. And prayer is central to everything that we do in any project we're working on. Don't ever underestimate that. I'm going to tell you a short story that just happened on the project that we were on. So we have this beautiful location. We've got to put a road in the desert. We have to build a road in the desert. These are 8-foot by 14-foot track mats that weigh 1,300 pounds each. And we need to lay about 80 of these. So a lot of logistics and planning goes into that. But let me tell you how God supersedes all of this in ways that you aren't even preparing for. But when you have a prayerful heart and a prayerful approach, God does things you could never have planned for or even prepared for. And I get a call from the production office, and she's actually sitting back there. She calls me and she says, hey, Kevin, we've just been notified that there's a forklift available for us out at the site where we're going to put these track mats down. And I said, well, we don't need a forklift because we've already got all of our manpower. So that's kind of a wasted resource. And, no, they're gonna let us use this forklift. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, this is just a waste of resource because we've got what we need. But unbeknownst to me, when they get out there, there are some logistics challenges. And the thing that saved us that day was a forklift. And wouldn't you know that this local rescue mission where we had prayed about and received some great labor, because we needed manual labor, so a rescue mission tied to the local church had sent us 8 guys to come and help us. And one of those guys was a certified licensed forklift operator. I can't plan that, folks. That doesn't go into a planning matrix and say, okay, let's make sure that a guy who's at a local rescue mission has a forklift license and can operate a forklift that we don't even know we need, that we don't even know is available, and that we didn't even plan for. You see what I'm saying? That's how you see in the spiritual realm God orchestrating things you could never imagine, and yet he demonstrated his love, fatherly care, and his provision in a way that was absolutely mind-blowing and impacted the whole team, and we got to share that story with all of our team.
That is, and having seen that firsthand, it's amazing. And seeing where the logistics of pulling everything together, you do the plan, you build the plan. A man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. You do everything that you can to build the plan, the best plan possible, to be able to make something happen. And then you say, okay, we know that because of what we're doing, we know because of the nature of what we're doing, that we will encounter things that are unexpected, and we have full expectation and reliance on the Lord because we can't make the right plan without him, and we can't make the solutions for the unplanned happen without him. So the unplanned, knowing that that's happening, that will happen, is not an excuse not to plan, but it's a recognition from day one that you have to have that reliance on the Lord. Any other notes on the same subject?
So something that's interesting about a lot of these detailed logistics, they're not really things that you want people to notice. They're more things that you want people to not notice, right? You don't want people to notice the precision with which the catering was on time. You just want them to enjoy the food. You don't want them to notice that there was a van to take them from point A to point B. You just want them to get on the van and go from point A to point B, right? So a lot of the things that we're doing to prepare the way to make things go smoothly, it's like a locations person will go out at 2 or 3 in the morning if the call time's 8 or 9 a.m. and they're putting up signs, they're putting up cones, they're putting up, lines that you're not supposed to cross. They're putting down some board in the house so that it doesn't get messed up. They're putting all these different things. They're not really things that a crew member is going to think, oh, wow, this is so wonderful because they're telling me I can't park here. But they serve a purpose and they're helping the greater good of the project to go forward. So as I think about all the different small details, like how does it have an impact? The interesting thing is every little detail does have an impact, but really most of the stuff you don't want anybody to even know that it happened. I mean, even right down to prayer. We may circle up as a Christian production and pray in the office for everybody on set. Does it have an impact? Absolutely. Is it a spiritual impact? Yes. Can it have a mental and a physical element? Sure. But it's not the kind of thing that somebody's going to be like, wow, I really think the production office is praying for us right now. It could happen. But it's the nature of it, right? These are not the kind of things that people usually identify. But I can tell you this. There are things that people, without knowing it, they do appreciate. Because if you're not sure where to go, and then you see a sign that lets you know where you're supposed to go, we all like that, right? I mean, anybody right here in this conference, you're going down a hall, you're not sure exactly where you're supposed to be, and then you see that sign that's exactly what you're looking for, you're like, yes, I am here, right? Well, somebody took the effort to make the sign, get it printed, get it put up on the board, get it put in the right place. So it's small details that we appreciate, but lots of times you don't really realize how much planning goes into it unless you were part of that team.
And I'll just say, if you take away all that planning and all those details, then you do have a crew that is confused. You do have chaos on set. You do have a lot of time being spent to getting the camera truck out of the way where it wasn't supposed to be, so you can get sound and camera and then G&E position. So by taking away these meaningless, seemingly insignificant elements, then you do have a crew that is mentally exhausted, physically exhausted, because they're wasting time trying to figure out where catering is, rather than just eating, getting refreshed, and going back to work. And yes, I think there was a spiritual element. You do recognize your dependency on God doing all this work.
I was just going to say, for me, planning the logistics comes down to, how do I take as much as possible off of the professionals that I've hired, allowing them as much brain space as possible to do their job, to build relationships with others, and to enjoy this process. And I don't want them to have to abandon their family for crew meetings that run until midnight. So how do I get as much of that done so they can show up, do their best work, and receive a blessing from actually doing that work instead of having to be figuring out details? So how can mealtime conversations be around spiritually engaging topics instead of fixing problems on set? That's a pre-production thing. All of those elements, I think, can serve the crew.
I think a lot of this is going to come down to whenever you're actually planning and prioritizing, you're building your plan, having your priorities straight, and looking at each thing that you do in the light of what's going to be Christ honoring and what's going to be taking care of the crew, what's going to be building them up. And if you look at it as each of these decisions, not just as a checkbox to be checked, or something that we need to deal with, or yes, another form that needs to be submitted to another organization. We look at it as an opportunity to honor the Lord, as an opportunity to build up the crew, as an opportunity to support the creative, as an opportunity to serve. You're going to find that it will have that kind of an impact. Because again, you're submitting each part of the process to Christ, you're submitting each part of it to the Lord, and you're doing it with that heart in mind. This next question I think is going to be a little bit more of a kind of a personal thing that I would love to get y'all's input on. I'm going to ask it this way, what do you find to be the best, to be that line between whenever you fight for an idea and when do you determine, okay, we're going to go ahead and sacrifice this concept? And I think that this may have some creative implications, and also sometimes this is going to be a location that you want to be at, or how we're going to shoot the movie. So what do you find to be that determining factor for we're going to hold on to this idea or we're going to let it go? I think David had a...
I'll start with a story while y'all can think about something wise to say. My very first project working as a producer, I was planning on being the very best producer there ever was in the world. And that meant that we were going to break for lunch on time, we were going to wrap on time, we were going to take care of people, everybody was going to have a great time, it was going to be great, right? We were going to come in on budget, by the way. Everything was going to be good. And we had a plan for that in my head. Well, we had all these creatives, and they had a different plan, because the DP wanted to get the very best picture and the very best coverage and provide the very best DP work that he could. And that immediately clashed with time. And then the art person and the wardrobe person, everybody wanted to do the very best they could. And everybody's vision clashed with my vision, because they all wanted to work an 18-hour day every day to do the very best they could with their job. And all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, so I'm feeling extremely selfish right now, trying to serve all of you by making sure you don't work too much. And it put me in this very difficult situation of all of a sudden feeling lost and trying to figure out what my job was. Because my job, rightfully understood, is to serve everybody else on the team and to help them achieve what they need to achieve so that we have a good product in the end. And so what I ended up figuring out on that project was I had to balance everybody else's desire to do the best they could with them possibly losing sight of what was best for them overall. So basically I tried to make sure that they didn't kill themselves while allowing them to do the very best work they could. And everybody was in agreement that they wanted to work longer to achieve a better end product. It's like, okay, then I need to sacrifice my ideals of a good producer and support them in that. So then my job changes from trying to wrap on time, saying, okay, if we're going to go longer, how can I make sure we have extra food? How can I make sure if somebody's too tired to drive home that we have somebody else to drive them home? How can I make sure that somebody's not doing something unsafe because of lack of sleep? You see how it changed my whole world in 15 minutes of meeting. When I went around the room and everybody in the room was saying, no, we don't want to have your pretty little 10, 12-hour days. We want to make something really amazing on a really low budget with very little time. So that was just an interesting dynamic. So as you think about what you have to do, I think safety is a big factor. Serving the project and serving the people is a big factor. And you just have to figure that out. So many of these things, each situation is different, which is why we're going to be talking a lot about just guiding principles and thought processes. You're going to have to apply those in each situation to what's right.
Outstanding, and I think one key piece to pull out of that story as well is you had clear communication. Having that clear communication and making sure that whenever you're making those hard calls, and again, this is talking about those hard calls, those like you feel that push-pull, having that communication, having that unity and everybody on the same page is really vital. Josh, I think you had something there?
Yeah, you know, when I'm a location manager on a project, I am there to facilitate the producer's vision, the director's vision. I'm there to make that happen. So it's rarely a case where I'm there and I have to tell somebody no. Usually my response is if I'm, you know, if we have a location, if we have a situation where I think is unsafe or I think is not going to work logistically, you know, a lot of times we get these awesome locations, and it's like, guys, there's 3 parking spots, and we have 100 people showing up here tomorrow, and this is like downtown. And so in those situations, I'm very careful to say, look, I'll go to the producer, whoever sent me out there, I'll say, look, these are the issues I see. I will say it's a great venue, and then I leave the decision to them, and I say, this is why I don't like it, but if you want to do it, we'll make it happen. And when I say we'll make it happen, there's always a way to make anything happen. It's your job to figure it out. So that's what I try to do. And also being a location manager, a lot of times you're a buffer. Just because someone has a great idea and you instantly have all these objections to it doesn't mean that you need to tell them no. I was talking with a first AD a few weeks ago, and he came into my little cubicle in the office. We were in pre-production, and he started talking about this great idea he had. And I'm just sitting there listening to him, and I let him, finish his thought and just go on. I was like, that's interesting. Then he walks away to go do something else, and the guy in the cubicle with me was like, he's like, well, that's not going to work because of this and this and this. And I was like, I know, but we'll wait and see what happens. 5 minutes later, I hear the first AD yell over the office, Josh, we're going to do something else. I don't think that was a good idea anyways. I didn't have to tell him no. I didn't have to be the bad guy. And we could carry on with what we were doing. So rarely do you have to tell somebody no. A lot of times, as you just walk through the process, the objections will become clear. They'll change their mind, and you can move on.
Yeah, I try to make it so the director has a choice. Like, let's say they want to, shoot a certain scene 10 times, and we don't have time for that day. Okay, so if we shoot that this day, then can you help me walk through the other scenes of this day? Where are they going? And if the director's like, actually, I think this is the crux of the movie. We spent so much money on this location. I need this scene. That is the director's choice as the creative vision. But he also has to help me walk through then. Okay, as long as, and he's like, oh, you know what? 3 of those scenes tomorrow, we don't really need, like, one of those scenes we can combine with this one. We can just shorten up the whole. So it's a process with them to say, I'm here to serve your vision. We've hired crew for however long, all the factors, and helping them walk through that. The hardest part of the logistics side is when I do occasionally AD. And for a long time, I just was like, you know what, I'm not going to touch it. And God has just had circumstances where I've had to AD. And so last year, there was a project where the client needed to do the session through, and then they wanted to do the entire session through again, just following. And it was just killing me. I'm like, why don't we get through everything? Then we'll come back and pick up what you missed. And the client just looked at me, and he's like, this is the way that the speaker needs to do it for, like, him. I was like, okay. And that's one of those moments, like, you just have to back down. I didn't know if it would work. And you know what? It worked just fine. And everybody was happy, and we made our day. And so listening to the creative vision, I think, really helps figure out, like, when to fight those things.
So I think a few of those guiding principles that I want to pull out of both of these are humility, recognizing you are not the end all, submission to others and reverence for Christ, and then also looking for the way that you can make that other person that you're having to potentially have that conflict with have an understanding of the ramifications. Generally, you're going to be on the same side of this whole thing if everybody actually understands all the pieces at play. Generally, a director's going to go, yeah, I really don't want to lose that scene tomorrow, or yeah, no, I really don't want to have a grumpy crew that's coming in an hour late because they only had 3 parking spots. They're going to want to find the way to make that work. And again, sometimes they're going to just realize, oh yeah, that's not the best idea. So helping everybody come to that conclusion together, laying out the facts, not sugarcoating, hey, yeah, sure, we can do it. But laying that out can be a big factor. Kevin, I think you had something to add.
Just great counsel, and the only thing I would add is, what is your motive? And that really gets to the heart of what Jonathan just said. I know President Ronald Reagan had a placard on his desk in the Oval Office, and it said, it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit. And so if you're thinking in terms of, as our Christian witness, how am I seeking unity in this? And let's pray. Don't ever underestimate the power of prayer. If you have a situation where we're at a crossroads, God is not a God of chaos. He's a God of peace. And we need to pray, and we need to pray that God will bring unity to this decision and unity amongst our team, and he's the one who's directing this. And this is, set my own personal agenda aside. What is my motive? My motive should be love and unity, and let's pursue that.
That's key. That's key. And again, too, having that recognition and mindset. Yes, film is forever, but at the same time as well, celluloid is going to rot. The digital medium will be lost eventually, but you're dealing with people with eternal souls. You're dealing with human beings, and having that recognition that your witness to them is as important as the end product. Yes, you do that with excellence. Yes, you love them by helping them to facilitate the best product possible. But having a heart of love in that and having that heart of that motivation of I am here to honor the Lord and to build up these people, so many issues become much less. And then you can deal with the fun ones like how to lay quarter-mile track mat. All right, let's look at this. This is, again, another one for guiding principles that you all find. How do you all handle working with inexperienced or disorganized creatives, because, I mean, none of us can relate to that whatsoever, who do not value or understand the value of logistics? They just don't get what we do. How do you all deal with that?
Be prepared for a lot of late nights because nobody understands what you're doing and they're not going to jump in and help.
I don't hire them.
I was just going to say, don't hire them, but in all seriousness, with that, because there is truth to that, that's part of the hiring process. I spent the last half of my career in the Army in human resources and doing talent, what I call talent maximization. And the idea is in that hiring process, make sure you are finding the person who's the right fit for the specific role that they're going to fill, because not everybody can do everything. Just because someone's willing to do something doesn't mean that they should do something, but that's a great start. We want them to be willing, but then we've got to really vet them properly to make sure that they are the right fit, because that can become a major obstacle and hindrance to the forward progression of this process, and it can really frustrate the production office as they're trying to constantly convince people why we need to have this time planning. I've heard the adage in the military, we used to say, if I had 60 minutes to solve a problem, I would spend the first 55 minutes planning and then the last 5 minutes to execute the solution. Because that planning process is so important as we think through it, and everyone on the team needs to understand the importance of that process. And so you can vet some of that in the hiring.
Yeah, and I feel like a deal memo can be really helpful in understanding at least some of this. Like, are they valuing that people are fed? Are they valuing that people are sleeping? Some of that can be vetted in like a deal memo type process. And then if you can find a way to work with creatives in some shorter project, we do a lot of this where we'll have something short, we'll bring on a new person, a new DP, a new gaffer, and work with them and see how they relate so that we're not hiring them for an entire feature where they're going to delay the process and make every day run late. And so things like that I think can be really helpful to just learn people, build relationships, talk to other people who've hired them to find out who does value that, because they need to eventually learn to value that to be successful.
Another piece, though, all joking aside on my part, there is an element of someone feeling understood and feeling valued that goes a long way towards them returning that back to you. So if you have somebody where they're just completely enraptured with what they see as important, then making sure that they feel understood, that they feel valued, that they understand that you understand them and you see that as important. Sometimes it's just some conversation saying, hey, where are you coming from? What challenges do you have that I might be able to help? Because if they understand that you're trying to help them and, it's a back and forth thing, and sometimes people just need to have the opportunity to get that fuller picture. So I think if you'll just take the opportunity, have a conversation with them, understand them, help them feel understood, then they're going to be a lot easier to collaborate with because you've developed some rapport and some friendship with them.
Yeah, I was basically going to say the same thing. Nobody likes to be told no or shut down right away. Oh, that's a terrible idea. It's never going to work. Especially somebody who's a creative, who's a DP, who feels like a lot of them personally is being invested in this project and it's going to reflect on them. They're pouring their heart and soul into this. And so one of the biggest things you can do is let them explain their idea. And again, you don't even have to tell them no or that that's bad. A lot of times they'll come to that realization themselves. And just as a creative, they're trying to get this information out and they're processing it by thinking out loud. So just having kind of an open, safe space for people to just kind of say their ideas I think helps everybody feel like they're being heard and valued, like David was saying.
Yeah, and as I think that a lot of this, what we find is that whenever you have those sorts of conversations, whenever you have the mindset walking into it that you're coming from the same side of the issue, it ultimately, you as the logistics specialist and they as the creative who don't understand logistics have the same goal in mind. You want to make an awesome movie. I don't think that anybody in this room or anybody in the creative teams would want to make a terrible movie or promo or whatever it is. You have the same goal, but you're just coming at it from different perspectives of what needs to be done to make that happen. And whenever you bring yourselves to the same side of the table, is it actually a really fascinating psychological thing in terms of negotiation that oftentimes it helps to bring both parties to the same side of the table. And if you're sitting across from each other, there can be this sense of animosity or antagonism between the two people. But if you bring both people physically to the same side of a negotiating table and put the problem in front of them, what that can have the result of doing is actually making you feel like you're both on the same team fighting the problem, not each other. And sometimes you're not going to be doing that physically. You're not physically doing that, and it may not even be something where it's an actual antagonistic issue. But what you can do is bring it to the point of changing the perspective. We are here on the same side, serving the same purpose, and how do we best achieve this common goal? Because your goals are going to be in common. If you've got this, if you're on this project, you're going to have the common goal of making a good movie. And hopefully, taking care of people along the way and honoring the Lord is going to be a shared value as well. And you're going to be able to find that common ground through that discussion process. I think one of our next pieces is the question about the task delegation process. David, I'd love for you to specifically speak to this one, and then Kevin, from your experience, and then if Sarah and Josh, if you have specific notes, what do you find to be the best way that the task delegation process works within the producer circle and the production department to keep the issue from having too many cooks in the kitchen happening? Because I think even as we've seen production departments and the logistical disciplines having to scale up due to, like you talked about, complications and things getting more wild and woolly in the world of filmmaking and filmmaking logistics, there is a way to make that happen and to have your task delegation work in a way it doesn't have to be confusing or too many cooks in the kitchen. Unless it's multiple members of the cook family, and that's not a bad thing.
So my goal when I'm working on a project is not to keep more of the work for myself. My goal is to find a team of people that can do the work and then just support them and troubleshoot problems. And everybody within any logistics sphere, I would say, is going to do a lot of troubleshooting and a lot of dealing with people. Doesn't matter where you're at within that spectrum, whether you're doing first AD work, whether you're doing locations, whether you're producing in any capacity. If you're in the production office, you're definitely dealing with people all the time. So I think that a lot of it is having the right mindset. If you're towards the top of the production team, your goal should be to surround yourself with as many people as you can afford that can do a good job at doing things that you don't have to do, so that you have time to do things you do have to do. There's certain things you have to do. It's typically the case. Not to say that anybody's not replaceable, everybody is, but the concept is there's certain responsibilities that your role has. So if it doesn't fall squarely within that responsibility and you can let somebody else do that, then you want to do that, because there's so many variables we don't know about. So when I'm working on a project and I have a great team of people with me, I'm trying to maximize their capabilities. I'm trying to give them as much decision-making power as possible. So usually I'll have a conversation with any given person about kind of what our goals are, our mindset is on something, and then I want them to run with it unless they have a question about it. And if they have a question about it, they run it back up. But my goal is to say, hey, I want you to run with this, right? And if there's an exception to that, I'll say, except for, this one location, let me know what they're saying on that before we get back with them, because it could be $50,000 or $10,000. But you know what? All the parks, just go for it, right? So that's kind of the mindset that I have. My goal is to empower everybody else on my team to do as much as they can and then be there to support them if they need it. It really doesn't usually become an issue then of having too many problems of everybody wanting to weigh in. And the other half of that, I guess, to finish that thought process is there's a very specific hierarchy typically on a film set. And I think if you have that and it's properly in place, there shouldn't be that many issues. You want to get a lot of input on something, and then whoever's responsibility it is to make the decision makes the decision. And it is a responsibility. Any decision a leader makes, they're serving everybody they're making that decision for. They're taking the responsibility of maybe getting it wrong and having to own up to that. But somebody has to make the decision. So whoever has that responsibility makes the decision, for better or for worse. It's okay, it's not a problem, you keep moving forward.
Really quickly, before we go to the more general, we've also got a question about the various roles and titles. Do you think that you could touch on that very briefly in the feature world, what those titles would look like, and very briefly what those roles would be? And then I'd love to hear Kevin's thoughts on how all that fits from a leadership perspective and building that team out.
Depends on the size of your project, but potential within a producer group, you've got your producer, you've got anybody else that shares the producing responsibilities, whether it's a line producer, a production manager, unit production manager, same thing, just union or not. You've got any co-producers, anybody else that's part of that producing team. Outside of, by the way, a producer just does whatever they don't hire anybody else to do. It can change a lot, okay? On a smaller project, a producer's doing a whole lot of stuff. On a really big project, they're just approving things and supervising everybody else and everything in between. But you've got the line producers usually handling budgets or crew, and the unit production manager is much the same thing. If you have both, usually I'm going to play to the strengths depending on who it is. But usually the production manager would be more responsible of supervising the budget that exists and approving spends based on the budget. Line producer would deal more with, human resources issues. But again, it can flip or they can collaborate together. You have the first AD responsible for communication and serving the director and everybody else on the crew by making sure that everybody knows what's supposed to happen, when it's supposed to happen, trying to bring all those pieces together at the right time so that you have maximum efficiency. And they have a whole department that goes, second, additional seconds, thirds, and then all the PA chain. You've got location management. As it sounds, they handle locations, location manager, assistant location manager, location scout, location assistants, and then location PAs. So that's that world. And then you've got the production office. So you'll usually have a production coordinator or production office coordinator, POC. Then you have assistant production office coordinator, or APLC, or APOC if you don't know what you're doing. And then there's as many people as you need in the production office to help assist with that, whether they're runners that just help facilitate things, or travel coordinators, or anything that could fall under that framework.
And again, like you said, that varies greatly from production to production, but having that framework is really helpful to understand, hey, these are some of these places where you need to be looking at who's going to be handling these jobs. And again, ultimately it comes back to the producer. Producer does whatever, he doesn't hire somebody else to do. Kevin, your thoughts?
I love when David was talking because I got to witness how he does this very well. I cannot tell you the number of times I walked in to David's office during this last project, and there would be some issue going on or some crisis, and he was as calm as could be, and he would just say, "Let's pray." Please don't ever underestimate the power of prayer. Even when it comes to something like, hey, task delegation, Kevin, give us the process. Well, the process begins with prayer because it really ties into the other word I want to give you, and that's communicate. We press this so hard in military circles all the time because communication is key. This is also, by the way, a little bonus tip, and this won't cost you extra, but it also works in your family. I've learned as a husband and father that a lot of the challenges that happen within my family are because I've failed to communicate the important information to the members of my team in my family. And I will tell you, asking this question often, who else needs to know? So if a decision has been made or we've delegated a task, be thinking, who else needs to know about that? Because maybe I'm sitting in the room, David delegates a task to somebody, and then immediately I'm thinking, oh, I know someone else is going to need to know that that person was just delegated so that they don't go spin their wheels. Maybe David's thought of it, maybe he hasn't. But everybody in that room, if everyone's thinking who else needs to know this, that communication line will stay open. And it's not just communicate, it's ongoing communication. Because remember, there's always changes, right? It's a rapidly developing situation. There's weather, there's personalities, there's injuries, there's sicknesses, there's things that don't show up when they're supposed to, there's things that we forgot because we're all humans and we didn't plan accordingly. So there's all sorts of things that can come in to try to disrupt your plan. And ongoing communication, I cannot overemphasize that. You have got to have ongoing communication throughout that and across the team, up and down the team, and everywhere else. Who else needs to know?
And please set that up. Be intentional about it. So figure out, okay, we're going to let the production coordinator know anytime there's a change, or we're going to let this particular person know on set. That's the AD team that's usually going to spearhead that. But try to intentionally set that up within your whole crew, within each department. Encourage them to have a communication system so that that can go out quickly. Because if you can get a change communicated to your whole crew in 2-3 minutes, that's super valuable. And a lot of people just neglect to set that up. So it can happen organically, but definitely try to make sure that there's a system for that.
And don't be afraid to over communicate. That's not a sin.
I would just say, even on smaller crews, I walk through somewhat of the narrative crew structure just to make sure that I am covering every department or that I have hired someone to. So it may be that we're wearing 3 or 4 hats. You know, one person is in charge of crew and that they're cared for, as well as locations, as well as overseeing this department or that department. And then I may be managing client and schedule. But I take the narrative process and just pull that over into my smaller crews to help me make sure that I'm not missing something. Even if it's just me, all of those jobs go on one checklist so that I'm not missing any of that.
And I think that brings us to another one of these core guiding principles for the world of logistics and also for life, that at least I found personally is a big piece. Number 1, don't assume. And number 2, restated, you don't get what you expect, you get what you inspect. If you don't check to make sure that something's being done, it's probably not getting done. And that applies to informing people about changes, that applies to making sure that the roles are covered on your set, that, again, includes the assumption of communication, and have we over-communicated? You can't just assume that something is happening or that somebody knows that something is happening until you have actually made that contact or checked with that person or you saw the email go out. So being diligent in those things and being faithful in that is going to solve so many of your problems so long down the road. I think that we've got just a limited amount of time, and so I'd love to combine a couple of these questions here. And they have to do with the common theme of witness on set. I'd love to ask you all the question, what is the thing that you find, whether it be a hostile environment or a friendly environment, to be the most key thing that you have found in making sure that people see the love of Christ through the logistical process? Because, again, there are going to be instances where you're working in the secular world or in the military sector, and it's not a place where you can just have everybody necessarily huddle up and pray or speak out vocally very loudly, and sometimes you are in those places. How do you make sure that that is what's coming through in what you're doing logistically or in these logistics roles? Josh, we'll start with you from locations.
So, as a location guy, I'm there to greet the crew in the morning, and I'm there to send them off home, hopefully at a decent time. Never underestimate the power of just being friendly with people and just letting God's love shine through you. You know, you don't always have to use words. You are always going to run into stressful situations on a film set. You're always going to have problems. And all those 70, 80 other people in the crew, they're going to have problems. And it's usually a daily thing. You know, when you're working, you know, anywhere from 12 to 18 hours, give or take, a day on a film set, that's when you see people get frustrated, because it's not that they're trying to be, it's just that everybody's exhausted. So if you can keep us, you know, that's when I try to be very intentional. You know, the rare times that I get frustrated about a situation or I'm feeling really drained, I try then to be really intentional about keeping the team going, about keeping a smile on my face, because that helps everybody else. You know, if we all just did what we wanted to do and go home and cry, it'd be a pretty bad place to work. So, and people do notice a difference. You know, if you're treating people with respect, if you're just being kind to people, if you're going out of your way to help other departments accomplish what they need to, that's not common, especially in the film industry, especially in Hollywood. And it does make a difference, and people are like, what's wrong with that guy? He's actually nice.
David?
Yeah, I think there's an element of treating other people the way you want to be treated, because there's so much that goes into this. There's so many different variables. We've touched on a lot of stuff, but I'm trying to think, like, how do you boil down, so many different things? It's such a big question and make it apply in many different scenarios. So I think many times there's things that cost us personally, whether it's our time or, our off time or our whatever it is. If it costs you, but you're able to help somebody else in the process, that speaks volumes. And I think it's a good mindset for you to have. It's like, hey, I'm here to serve other people. I'm not looking out for my interest. Something that I encourage our teams on when we start a project is I say, a lot of people will tell you to look out for number one, that number one being you. What the Bible teaches us is to look out for each other. And it's really a simple math equation for everybody that uses spreadsheets. So if everybody is looking out for themselves first, then it's only you looking out for you first and foremost. But on a crew of 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, or put the number on there, if everybody else has the mindset of looking out for others and not having to worry about looking out for themselves, then they have however many people are on that crew or however many people are around them at that time looking out for them. And if everybody can have that mindset, simple math, right? What would you rather have? Yourself, and you don't even have eyes in the back of your head? Or would you rather have other people that are looking out for you? And that's their mindset is, hey, I'm going to make sure that they're okay. I'm going to make sure that they're drinking enough water. Because more often than not, somebody else is going to spot that, not you. And something that simple as you offering somebody else, hey, are you okay? You staying hydrated? Isn't that so much better than them just focusing on whether they're drinking enough water and you focusing on whether you're drinking enough water? So just having that mentality of looking to others, not yourself, focusing on others, how you can serve others, how you can help others and look out for them. Even if everybody isn't modeling that, you can still model that. And chances are other people are going to pick up on that. And they might start looking out for you even if they don't do that for anybody else. So that's just my thought.
One of my favorite moments was talking about a project with someone, and they mentioned that they said, I've seen cast treated with respect and given space for these different things, but it's not often that the crew is given that space. And so to me, when I look at a film crew, everyone deserves the same thought towards their individual needs. And I think that can be a testimony, and that goes to the client, to the producers, to the executive producers, to anyone on that team. And I like to think of it as going the extra mile. So I can't, obviously budget constraints, you can't always put everybody in the highest end hotel or whatever, but what are extra mile things that you can do to value them? Whether that's taking them, making sure there's some sort of wrap celebration to celebrate the work that they've done. And then thanking people, like every person who comes and who sits in a seat in front of the camera or behind it is helping that project actually get done. So I think thank yous, whether physical thank you in a meal or a gift, or even just verbal thank yous across the producing team can make a really big impact.
Everybody hold up your hand like this. Okay, 5 words, ready? How can I serve you? If you ask that question and make that a part of your interactions with other people, what you're hearing right here is a heart of service. How can I serve you? That is a very disarming question for people that everyone wants to be loved and valued and treasured, respected and honored. And when you say, how can I serve you? It demonstrates that. And I want to tell you, 1 Peter 3:15 and 16 was the guiding passage for my entire time in the military, and as I would say, my guiding passage for life. It says, but in your hearts, set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you for the hope that is within you. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. I want to tell you a story of what happened on this project. It's very short. We're in the wardrobe, and our lead actress, who's a believer, is getting fitted, and while she's being fitted by our wardrobe lead, who is not a believer, our lead actress looks over and notices she has a suitcase that this wardrobe lead had used for all of her gear, and it was completely destroyed. This thing was supposed to have 4 wheels, it only had 2, and they were in the wrong place, and it was duct taped all over the place. And so the lead actress reaches out to me, because she was also a co-producer, and she reaches out to me as co-producer and says, "Hey, Kevin, can we get a new suitcase for Sarah?" And I said, "Absolutely." Now, I want you to think of the power of what happens in this situation. $180 expense. We buy her a new suitcase. We surprise her. Our lead actress walks in, presents this new suitcase, and what that communicated to our wardrobe department head was, "We see you. We love you and we care for you." And that was a more powerful sermon to her than anything we could have said. Now, I'm not saying it's not important for us to communicate the gospel, because faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ. Okay? So I'm not diminishing that. What I am saying is we need to be a demonstration of that. It's not just our doctrine, and I think Eric Ludy was talking about this the other night, right? It's not just our doctrine and our thinking, but our actions and our behaviors need to demonstrate it. People respond to that. And I will tell you, on the last day, that wardrobe lead came up to me with a card and tears in her eyes, and she said, "I have never felt so loved and cared for on a movie set than I was on this one, and I can't wait to work with you all again." Drop the mic.
Incredibly powerful. There are so many different ways that in this specific field and set of fields that we have to share the love of Christ with folks. And again, like has been said here, that goes into the planning. How are you planning? How are you looking for the ways that things be taken care of? Are you submitting the entire process to Christ? Are you having a heart of service in how you're approaching people? Are we looking to communicate with people? And again, show them that we value these people the way that Christ values them, and also we value the work that they're doing and that we're doing together in such a way that we are going to do with excellence. There's so much to be said here that could be said if we had more time, but our time for this session, unfortunately, has wrapped up. So we'll close out in prayer, and then everybody will be dismissed from this space and then be back here very shortly for our closing session of the day. So, dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for the opportunity that we have in this industry as a whole and in the logistical disciplines, Lord, to glorify you, to show you to people, to express your heart for people. And Lord, I just pray for each person in this room and that is watching this currently and that will be watching it, Lord, that they will be able to find ways to do that, ways to show your love to people, that you would encourage them, that you'd give them wisdom and understanding. And Lord, I just pray that your name would be glorified in what is done because of what's been said here. And Lord, that just that your name would be glorified in the nations through what happens in this industry. I thank you, Father. Give us safety. And Lord, just please continue to have your hand upon this event. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you all for coming, and we look forward to having you back in this space very soon.